Hope you love the channel and find it useful in becoming a happy retiree. Subscribe today. What is Bitcoin? Why is it so popular? Why did what was only trading at $1,000 at the last December hit over $5,500, $5,500 this week in an explosion in price? Wall Street has gone crazy over Bitcoin in the past few months. Just last week, Goldman Sachs reported they are going, or at least they're considering, and they very likely will do this, a Bitcoin trading operation. Goldman Sachs. We're not talking about some new fly-by-night company that's getting into a, quote, fad. We're talking about Goldman Sachs. So the price of Bitcoin has skyrocketed so much. If you look at the chart of Bitcoin, it looks like it was on the cover, first of all, of every financial news homepage over the past week. But in order to do that, you've got to understand the technology behind it. And the technology, called blockchain technology, is shaping the future of our economy, much like the beginning of the internet. So if you go back into the 1970s when the internet was just a fraction of what it is today, a few computers linked across the country, that's where blockchain technology is today. And now we know what happened over the last 40, 50 years with the internet. And over the last 20 years, it's changed the way we live. The first technology to really compete with that, or at least from the possibility of how it could shape our future, has to do with blockchain technology, which is new. And I'm going to explain that today, and Bitcoin today. I'm not banking my future on Bitcoin because I think it's surely a disaster waiting to happen just because of the price volatility. But I've had an account at Coinbase for some time now. And Coinbase is an app where you put in $10, $20 and just convert it to Bitcoin. And I did that about a year ago to see just what would happen with it. I wanted to at least participate and understand this new currency. It's a cryptocurrency, virtual currency, call it what you want, but I needed to understand it. And I've been watching it, studying it for the last, let's call it over the past year or so, and finally I finally understand it to the point, and the technology to the point where we're going to talk about it today, and I'm going to explain what the heck it is, because we can't ignore it anymore. This is part of our life. It is something that is happening. And even though JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, who I love, called it still the currency of drug dealers and murderers, and if somebody at his firm thought about trading Bitcoin, he'd fire them. And this guy is a guy we love. But at the same time, this is something that we need to understand. Now, let's talk through this technology. So first of all, how does Bitcoin work is what we all want to know and understand. But in order to do that, we have to understand this blockchain technology. So talking about that is kind of like bringing up the internet in the 1980s. Well, what the heck is it? How does it work? What's it really going to do for my life? So Wall Street, again, is going crazy over this. Let's understand blockchain technology. Blockchain is, again, let's call it a new technology. It's not a currency. In fact, it has nothing really to do, it wasn't designed for currencies at all. It's its own it's a new kind of technological backbone. Think of, again, what the internet was in the 1970s, the very beginning stages, just a few computers linked together. But the technology of sending messages over data, that's what existed. Again, not widely used, but at least it had been created. Think of blockchain as the next potential internet. So we can't dismiss it. And just because we associate Bitcoin with blockchain, it doesn't mean that's why we're going to talk about this today. Just because Bitcoin is used by drug dealers on the Silk Road, it doesn't mean we can't understand and give Bitcoin a minute here. So first, let's talk about blockchain and what it could do potentially to financial intermediaries or just different industries. And again, remember, and I'm going to explain this as best I can about how this technology works. Blockchain is a distributed ledger technology that it provides a way, it's a new way to record and the key statement here is to record safely and transfer data safely that's transparent and auditable and supposedly resistant to outages and hacks and so forth. And it could replace the need for financial intermediaries. It's that secure. So instead of needing a bank to transact a monetary payment, blockchain allows people from peer-to-peer networks, just person to person, to have a trusted network and a trusted transaction, meaning that, hey, this money is real, it's not counterfeit, it's in my account, and it's going to go to you. And right now we use a bank to facilitate that. Blockchain can eliminate the need for that bank. So think of the impact here. The same way the internet impacted media, big banks like Barclays are already using this to make their transactions more secure. So big banks are not going to just ignore blockchain. It's that big of a deal. By the end of this year, IBM says that 15% of all banks will be using some sort of blockchain technology by the end of this year. Cybersecurity, another area that's going to get impacted. Blockchain, the blockchain ledger, depending on what industry we're talking about here, is public. And the data is encrypted and then it's verified in a way using what's called this new term, cryptography. So the data is less prone to being hacked or changed without authorization. Again, this could eliminate middlemen like banks and payment centers and transfer companies. It could eliminate the background of the DMV. Well, the DMV exists to verify you are who you say you are, among other things, title companies. So blockchain can replace a lot of what these institutions do. Of course, it could impact supply chain management, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, remember, is just this technological interconnectedness of pretty much anything. Your refrigerator can have a semiconductor inside of it and talk to your Wi-Fi, and you can control the temperature of your refrigerator when you're in another state. That's the Internet of Things. It's hooking up everything in our life, appliances, how we move, all of this together into one central hub. That's the Internet of Things. And again, blockchain can make this all secure. Think about elections, gambling, insurance companies, all could be using blockchain technology over the next decade. Transportation, so think about when you're ready to park or pay a toll or get electricity for your electric car, blockchain technology could impact how we do this. Because again, it is a way of arranging a contract between people. So think about arranging a contract between your driver and a rider, just what Uber does to some extent, but using blockchain technology. So we're going to continue to talk about this and explain exactly how it works in a metaphor. Here's another way to think of blockchain technology versus what we have today. And I'm going to use the example of whisper down the lane. Ryan calls it whisper down the line. I always have called it whisper down the lane, where you start with a word and there's 20 people in a line, and by the time the word gets whispered from person to person to person, at the end it gets changed. Right? So imagine you're the 20th person in this first, let's play whisper down the lane the old way. By the time the word gets to you, it becomes a mess. So it starts out person one, bologna sandwich, and then it continues to get morphed down the line until the 20th person, it gets to you, and now it's Barack Obama loves his sandwich. That's how data gets altered ever so slightly, time after time, and eventually becomes wrong. So bologna sandwich turns into Barack Obama loves his sandwich. That's the misdirection and slight mistakes over and over create a big problem. That's old technology. Now let's play whisper down the lane using blockchain. Imagine that every time you whispered to your next partner, each person from the very beginning had to get it right and then re-verified with all people before that. So it has to be perfectly right, passed from person to person every time in order for the next person to even take their turn. So bologna sandwich, as we start out, is said perfectly each and every time. And you cannot take your turn until it's re-verified with everybody else who started from the beginning. So the fifth person has to verify with 4, 3, 2, 1. The eighth person in Whisper Down the Lane has to verify with 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that by the time you get to the 20th person, bologna sandwich is still exactly the same terminology, bologna sandwich. And if there's any sort of mess up down that line, or the chain of data gets tainted, then everybody knows about it. And we cannot continue on. That's blockchain technology. So to think about these, and we're going to talk about currency when we get back, every dollar, take a dollar bill out of your wallet right now. It has a serial number on it, every single dollar bill. But there's no record of it. It goes from person to person to person 1,000 times before a Federal Reserve will ever recheck that serial number. Imagine how easily that can get in the wrong hands or used in the wrong way. Blockchain technology in a virtual currency really eliminates so much of that. In a year where markets just continue to plow forward. So we've gone a year and a half, 18 months without a 5% dip in the market. The VIX, volatility index, an all-time low in the stock market, making the VIX short volatility, quote, the sure thing on Wall Street, which again, sure things always unravel and blow up. And that's probably what's going to happen. Just like .com did, just like house flipping in the 2000s, just like can't miss real estate. So there will be a time, of course, when this volatility goes back higher. You don't have 150 years of volatility and then all of a sudden it goes away. Especially not in the scary world that we live in. And I'd say that the scary headlines are as unsettling as they've ever been. Congress can't stand each other. They're effectively at war back and forth with the president. The administration still has trouble getting anything done. We've got North Korea still back and forth, crazy one day, silent the next. So there's just an awful lot that continues to happen, and yet markets continue to plow forward. So at some point, there'll obviously be some sort of correction, because that is the nature of the stock market. The Dow for the year, though, up over 15%. The S&P 500 at 14% for the year. The 10-year Treasury hovering around 2, a little higher than 2.25%. That's the world that we live in today. Now, we've talked about what over the next, call it decade, will take shape in various industries, and that's a brand new technology called blockchain. It's as big as the internet in the very, very beginning, meaning that it has the potential to change and impact in all industries, just like the internet has changed all industries. It used to be, we're just going to buy books on Amazon, and now Amazon's putting big retail companies out of business because it's a slightly better way to buy stuff. And that's the type of thing that the internet has done that you couldn't even foresee in the 70s and the 80s, when it was still just this nascent little network where you could send a few word messages through email. And it has changed the entire way we live. Now we watch video on our phones because of the internet. So we technically can unplug, and we don't even need a TV anymore because our TV is right here on our phone. In the beginning stage of the internet, it still hadn't even evolved enough. It hadn't even evolved enough for us to know the potential of what it could do. And that's a lot like what blockchain is, or where blockchain is now today. Other technologies evolved to be able to make this new technology practical in a way that 20 years ago with data and space, we couldn't even have done that. So now let's talk about how this technology, or this blockchain technology, actually can play into a currency. So this new currency called Bitcoin, it's a virtual currency. And again, using or paying by Bitcoin, think of this as a way of securely passing just unique serial numbers from person to person. A serial number just like you have on each dollar bill. If you take a dollar bill out of your wallet, a 5, a 10, a 20, a 100, it's going to have a serial number on it, which is a unique identifier. Now, a counterfeiter can copy that dollar bill, copy that same serial number, change the serial number, but there's no way when you pass it on, that next person verifies that it's counterfeit. So that's the fault in our system today. So we have numbers now on a new technology. Imagine that on each new bill or each new coin, each serial number is now verified and checked in a database to make sure that it's not counterfeit. Just imagine that simple functionality changing how secure money is moving forward. So just like most other currencies, though, the only reason that any currency is worth anything, that people have to agree upon the value. Just like we agree upon the value of the dollar today. It's not necessarily, it used to be backed by something. There used to be a gold standard, but that's long gone. So nothing really backs a dollar except the faith that we have in that dollar. Same thing with these new currencies. They're not worth anything unless the community around that currency says, yeah, I think it's worth something. So Bitcoin uses this new encryption way of thinking, or this new blockchain technology. Each coin or piece of currency has a unique serial number. Each transaction is recorded on this giant Bitcoin network. So that you can't spend the same coin twice. You can't copy it. So think of it as just a currency, just like a dollar bill that, again, has a unique serial number on it. But instead of passing it from person to person, Bitcoins also have these unique serial numbers encoded on them. And then every single one of them and every transaction is recorded. And the transaction is stored. And each transaction is verified electronically in order to spend or do the next transaction. Just like the whisper down the lane analogy I just gave you. So the verification system is this new ledger that you can't mess with. The verification system is this new technology. It's a new and improved ledger system, keeping track of each recorded transaction. So believe it or not, as much as Bitcoin is still used on the black market, it's actually a much, much more secure way to transact business. It's still just not mainstream yet. Here's how that chain of security would work. I'm going to give you 5 easy steps on this. Okay, 1, each coin has a unique serial number, each piece of money. Number 2, each time a user uses a piece of this currency, they have to sign for the transaction. So now each user has their own security code, if you will, like a fingerprint. So in order to spend money, you not only have to record the serial number of the piece of currency, you have to also verify it with some sort of unique fingerprint. Number 3, now there's a public ledger. Think of it as a giant data hub or a giant library that stores every single transaction, a record of all transactions for that particular piece of currency, so that everyone can look at it and monitor it. So each serial number has to be and can be verified, and every time it's used again, re-verified again. Now, who looks at the public ledger, right? Is there some sort of Bitcoin king? No. Think of this as a giant verification library that everybody in the network has access to. So everyone who uses Bitcoin has a copy of this ever-evolving database or this library. So everybody can keep track of any given transaction. And the minute something goes wrong or there's a hack, it's known that that piece of currency or that serial number is tainted and nobody uses it anymore. Next, in order to protect you versus a group of, let's say, rogue Bitcoiners, meaning like, let's say half the library wants to take off with all Bitcoins and leave the weak half behind, the history and transaction ledger of all these Bitcoin transactions has to be unchangeable and unalterable, or a word you'll start to hear more and more of, immutable. The only way to do this is to use this new blockchain technology like I just talked about. It records a ledger for each bill or each coin, and because each event in history is recorded and encrypted and then chained to the rest of its history, all past transactions would have to again be hacked by solving some crazy puzzle in order to manipulate that particular bill or coin. So to see the difference between the kind of technology we use today with money versus how Bitcoin uses technology. So this is a very highly evolved ledger, and it's called blockchain, and it's who knows, let's call it 1,000 times more secure than what we use today. And the problem though so the technology behind it is amazing. It's wonderful, and it's going to change multiple industries, not just currency. The problem with Bitcoin is the value. And the value that gets traded on an exchange is wildly volatile. Hi, I'm Wes Moss, and thanks for taking a minute to hear about what's so different about my new book, You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think. So unlike other retirement books, this book will give you a step-by-step guide, whether you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, to learn from what these successful and happy retirees did to get there. I hope you enjoy the book, but more importantly, I know that it'll help you retire sooner than you think.